Welcome to another episode of Mind Control. I'm here with Karla today. Thank you, Karla, for coming on and wanting to talk about your experience in a closed high control group. Um, that's really brave, and I just want to start by acknowledging that because when people go through these experiences and are controlled in so many different ways. It takes so much effort and so much courage to kind of just like become who you are again. So I just want to acknowledge
Mm,
that.
Thanks. I appreciate you doing this podcast because it's important. And also, like, it's been 25 years since I left this group, and only in the past probably 3 or 4 years is when I've really just come to realize all the stuff that was messed up about it. Can I swear
Oh,
or no?
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
my
Yeah.
tagline for mind control, the tagline is it's mind control, the holy shit show.
Okay. Okay.
So Carla's from Canada. She lived in Oregon for a while. How long were you in Oregon?
For 15 years.
Okay. What was it
Mhm.
like being like in the United States and then, or in Canada and then United States and then Canada? Like, was it pretty much similar since Oregon's so close to Canada, or was there like big differences?
There were big differences because I was from the center of Canada, from east to west, and then going to west coast. So if it was like, say, from like Vancouver, Canada to Oregon, a lot more similarities. But going from like the center, east to west, to the west coast, big difference. And now I'm back on in Canada, but on the east coast, another big difference. So yeah, there was definitely culture shock when I first moved there. My first job, especially, I had to learn how to interact with coworkers that was appropriate or that they deemed appropriate. And yeah, so it was a learning curve for sure. Being back in Canada now um, has been good. I really, really miss the States. And but like also glad to be away from Trump, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Understandable. Um, so Carla was in a group, a closed high control group, according to the criteria that we've both discussed. This is what we both, this is both just our opinion, but the Gateway Christian Community Church, which is a non-denominational Christian group, that we'll go over some experiences that Carla had within this group, and hopefully other members of Gateway Christian Community Church will find this podcast and either get some validation for their own experience or possibly even get a little nudge to leave if they're still in. Um, because freedom and choice and just sort of like control over your own life is a fundamental human right and that I believe in. And so I hope that for everyone on this planet. Um, so do you want to talk a little bit, Carla, about because you have a mom and a sister that are still in that group, and you were a first generation survivor. So would you like to talk a little bit about what drew you into this group? Um, Maybe some things that you think were reasons that you were sort of primed at that point in your life to join a group like this?
So my mom and sister aren't actually in the same one. They're in the same type of one. And so it's like far right evangelical Christian churches that they're in. So
Okay.
I don't think that all of the things that happened at Gateway are happening at the churches that they're at, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just like I'm constantly still bombarded with the mindset from both of them. And I have no other siblings, and my dad died when I was 18, and he and I were a lot alike, and my mom and sister are two peas in a pod. Um, so yeah, I
A
feel
little
like
bit
I'm
of the
the
black sheep
third
experience.
wheel. Oh, definitely the black sheep. Not just because of that, but because of being queer. And
Hmm.
so yeah, sorry, what was the rest that you asked about?
Sorry, I kind of doubled on
Sorry,
some
yeah.
questions there, but kind of like what, like when you got into the group, how
Why?
or why or like sort of like was there something going on in your life where because a lot of people that join these kind of groups, they're
Hmm.
either young or they've just
Hmm.
moved to a new place or they're vulnerable in
Hmm.
some other way, and that's sort of
Hmm.
how, they're looking for a group or something.
Hmm. So I would say that, like, first of all, like, when you say I'm a first generation survivor, um, on my mom's side, and my mom is white, and it's her family has been in Canada for generations, and it's a whole bunch of pastors for generations back. And
Okay.
so I'm the first one to leave it from like my nuclear family of birth, of origin, but I have cousins who have left Christianity. And then on my dad's side, we're of Indian descent, and he was raised with a combination of Hinduism and Christianity, but not really far into either.
Hmm.
But my mom made him convert to born again Christianity before she'd marry him. And then after he decided he did believe Hindu things. And so my mom decided that because of that, she was the one who should decide how my sister and I were raised. And I was 11 before my dad finally convinced my mom that he should have some say too. And I was allowed to go to the Hindu temple with him. And so, like on my dad's side, there was already, um, people had already, it, it wasn't something that any of his family, his siblings, sorry, it's not something that any of his siblings were involved in when they were in Trinidad, which my family was brought over as indentured servants from India to Trinidad. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, so none of them were raised that way, but there are ones who have gotten into the same sort of Christianity or Mormonism.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the reason I was primed to go in it is, first of all, I was 19. So I was
Hmm.
looking to like branch out on my own and have like to be an adult. Uh, Secondly, like my dad had died in the past year prior to me joining it. So I
Right.
was also in a very emotionally vulnerable place. And I had somebody from the church I was at, like as a teenager, that my mom had chosen, who was going to this church that I had joined. And so I went with them, and that's how I got into it. And so did they. Um, and then they left it far earlier than I did. But yeah, that's how I ended up there. So I was there from the ages of 19 till about 27-ish.
Okay, got it. And sorry that that happened to you with your dad passing away when you were so young. That's a very traumatic thing.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
and it does leave you vulnerable if you've lost support in your life. And that's something that I think is a lot of people will be able to identify with is feeling vulnerable from either some event or something, or whether it's just because they were taken advantage of in some way through their childhood and then sort of were looking for support elsewhere, and that support that they found turned out to be manipulative and coercive and, just not healthy. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, just for the audience, so first generation survivor is somebody that has got into a group like this, um, like I guess they weren't born into it, and then second generation is you were born into it and then you get out later. But it's kind of nuanced. Actually, me and my sibling were talking about this, the last podcast that I posted, because I think she was sort of a toddler whenever my parents joined, and my parents had her like really young. They were basically 18 and 19, and I think my sibling was 2 or 3 years old when we got in. So like technically
Hmm.
she would be a first generation survivor. But in my mind, I'm like, that's a second generation survivor. You're a
Oh yeah,
baby,
for
you
sure.
know?
For
And
sure.
like in your
Mm.
case, if your mom and, your family and, grandparents and generations have been in this way of being, um,
Hmm.
to me, that would be a second generation, not, maybe not technically, but like
Hmm.
as an academic term, but as far as epigenetics and just like breaking through those, years, generations and generations of being this certain way and, predispositions towards certain things. Wow, you have done a lot of work. You are very brave and you're one of those people that comes into a generation or, a genetic line and just breaks through all of these things that most people wouldn't be able to handle. So you're very strong, um,
Thank you.
to be able to, yeah, to do what you've
Can I
done.
just say something else about the black sheep thing?
Of course.
Is that so on my mom's side there were seven siblings, like including my mom, and they all, well, most of them had lots of kids, and so like I have a lot of cousins, but I was the first one um to first and still only, even though it's been 20 years, to come out as queer. So
Wow.
that was a big thing too. I'm not the only one who is queer. I'm the only one who's out to our family,
Wow.
even
Yeah,
after 20
that's
years.
huge. Good on you.
Mm. Oh, well,
Um,
thanks. I'm just saying like that's part of why I'm in the black sheep.
right.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, have there been, I'm sure, mm, I'm sure that's a whole thing, like within your family and that sort of dynamic, because usually with these evangelical Christian type groups, they are very
Mhm.
resistant to anything that goes against the status quo, especially when it comes to gender identity and anything that's outside of like the binary construct.
Mhm.
Um, is there anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, so I came out 20 years ago as pansexual, and I came out a year ago as um gender diverse, like as gender fluid demigirl specifically. And so in both cases, I came out to friends before I came out to my family. Um, with my mom, like I was married to my wife for 15 years before she died this past year.
Mm,
And my mom was very much a realist that our marriage was legal, but in the eyes of God was not real. So she recognized that it was legal in the eyes of the government, but not in the eyes of God. And so she still thought it was sinful, but she did treat my wife well, and she did actually love her. And then with my sister, when I have two nieces who are uh, 14 and 16. When my sister was pregnant with my youngest niece, someone who's 14,
mhm,
um, my wife Norma and I said we were gonna come to Canada for the birth. And my sister told me she only wanted me to come. And the reason for that was because she was having a C-section, which she would be tired and hurting, and she would need help with the older one, who was like a year and a half at the time. But she was willing to sacrifice to pray for her kids not to receive my spirit of homosexuality, um, but for the amount that it would be with me. But she was not willing to sacrifice also for my wife, who was my fiance at the time, but we hadn't yet set a date. And so because my sister explained that it's not just double the spirit of homosexuality if my wife was there, but if it's a homosexual relationship, it exponentially increases the amount of spirit of homosexuality that she would have to pray that her kids would not receive. And so obviously I did not go, and we got married then instead.
Wow. So they think that homosexuality is contagious?
Well, my
That's what it sounds
yes, I'm pretty
like.
sure my mom does too, but my sister definitely does. Yes.
Dang.
And
I've never heard
also that
that. That's
I'm
crazy.
a groomer slash pedophile slash predator. She thought I was, when my niece was like 4-ish, she thought I was gonna sexually assault my niece.
Mm. You know, listening to that, it's just like I feel sorry for your sister, honestly, because just to imagine kind of like the amount of fear that she must feel sort of like all the time about things like that
Hmm.
or other things like that's just a mindset of like being constantly worried about stuff that just has nothing to do with you. Like, what in the world? Thanks for sharing that, though. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are in your situation who
Yeah.
are in a situation like you were in that have experienced similar things. So, yeah, thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. So you were in the group for about 8 years, and
Yeah.
do you remember, was it like a certain event or something that triggered you being able to leave, or was it just like a lot of stuff that built up over time? What was it like for you
Mm.
getting out?
So it wasn't my choice. So they encourage you to get married young. And if you're not married by about age 25, then they'll set you up with somebody in the church. And so, it's better to choose your own. And so I got married when I was 22, and you're not allowed to live with them before marriage, of course. So, found out like as soon as we got married that my husband was physically abusive. And I asked the pastor for help, like immediately when we got back from our honeymoon. And he talked to him one time and just like, you know, you shouldn't do that. And then that was it. Like never checked back in with me, never talked to him again about it. And so after 4.5 years, I was fearing for my life because it progressively got worse, obviously. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to get help from the church. I need to leave, which was a really hard decision because first of all, a lot of my friends are in the church. Secondly, um, eh, divorce is frowned upon. Thirdly, in that church, they're really big into public shaming. So if somebody leaves their spouse, regardless of the reason, they're going to tell everybody at the next congregational meeting. And then whoever stays, whichever is the spouse who stays, is seen as a trooper. And the spouse who leaves is no. So I had to make the choice to lose my home because I had to move, my marriage, my church, um, all at the same time just in order to get away. But he was welcome to stay there, of course, because he's the trooper, but I was not welcome back. And then what happened is like the day that I left, that night I went to my pastor and told him why I left. And because I felt like I needed to be accountable. And so then he called me every single day for a month, trying to coerce me into going back to my husband, and then called regularly after that, but not every single day. And nobody else from the congregation's allowed to contact you, lest they be swayed by you. And so, and during that time, like this was in the 90s, and so not very many people had cell phones, and so whoever left is the one who got a new phone number, right? So it's not like you could
Mm,
just, unless that person contacted you because you were close enough. um yeah, so it was a very isolating experience, and it wasn't my choice. And obviously I'm really glad now that it happened, but
hmm.
at the time it was a devastating decision for sure.
Yeah, going through that must have been hell. Thanks for sharing all of that. I'm sorry about you know, the abuse, and that's just terrible.
Well, I think like in this sort of church, like the husband, it's preached from the pulpit on the regular. The husband is the head of the household, and so the wife can have an opinion, but the husband makes the ultimate decision, and and it just makes it so that domestic violence is, um, I think, more rampant in those communities because it's not checked.
Mm-hmm.
And I know other people who were assigned female at birth who were um, who went through the same thing and did not get help, were not able to get help from the church for domestic violence when they reached out.
Yeah, that's so sad. So if anyone's listening and you are in that situation, um, call the police. It's okay. It's okay to get help.
Mm.
Is there anything that you would say to somebody who's in that situation now?
Well, I know how hard a decision it is when everything that you're told constantly is that all of it is wrong. Leaving is wrong, not listening to your husband is wrong. And so, like, I know it's a very, very difficult situation, but you need to get out for not only your own physical safety, but your own mental health,
Hmm.
emotional health, and it's worth it. Well, I can only speak for myself and other people that I know who've been in similar situations, but it's definitely worth it, even though it's so difficult to actually do it.
Yeah, wise words. And you literally went to the person who was, you felt accountable to, and it was no help. So you were trying to do what you thought was the right thing based on your experience up to that point. And they were basically just
Mhm.
like, well, uh, yeah, we're cool with this. Um,
Yeah, like right from the beginning. And then when I left, and like I said, that night went to the pastor to be accountable to him, it was it was all, well, go back and work it out from within the marriage, even though he knew it was physical abuse. And even though he had not helped me the whole time, and even though my husband refused to go for any marriage therapy or counseling or whatever because he was the head of the household and he'd decide when we need to do it and we don't need to do it because he said I was so annoying, and if I wasn't so annoying he wouldn't need to be violent. And so it was, the fault is always put on the person who's the victim.
right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, so sorry. Um,
Thanks.
I'm glad you're out, and
Me too.
that sucks that that was what pushed you to finally get out, but you're out now and living your best life. So,
Mhm. Well, I often think, like, what if he wasn't abusive? Would I still be in that church? Would I still be married
mm,
to him and be in that church if it weren't for that?
yeah. Hmm. So you're in this group for, 8 years during from 18 to 25, I think you said 27.
Mm,
And
yeah, somewhere. So,
so during that time, you have like all this religious doc indoctrination that's happening, and
hmm
then you go through this experience and you get out. Do you find yourself sort of rejecting all spirituality, religious stuff, for a time being, and then, figuring out what you actually believe as a person, or how did that process kind of go with you?
so for me, I still stayed in evangelical Christianity, um, not in any groups that were so high control, but that's what I knew, and that's what I thought was right. So I did stay in that for a few years. And then when I came out as pansexual, obviously I could not stay in those churches, which was really hard for me to even come out to myself because, of being indoctrinated from the time I was born that it was wrong. And um, so then what happened is when I came out, then I started being part of a more progressive Christianity and actually was at a church. It's a denomination called Metropolitan Community Church, and it was started in the 70s by a gay man, um, specifically for people who identified as Christian but um, were rejected by other Christian churches. And so now that denomination is still thriving, and the majority of people who go there are queer just because of that, but obviously anybody is welcome. And so that's where I was for several years, and that's where I got married to my wife. Um, and then I left Christianity altogether about 7 years ago. It was actually like when I moved back to Canada
Hmm.
and wasn't able to find, I have uh, physical disabilities, and I wasn't able to find a church that here where I moved to um, that fit my physical needs. And so then I had stopped going to church, and then that's when I think like had the space enough from it to leave Christianity altogether, and start my deconstruction process.
That's beautiful. So, yeah, that is something that there's a term in the sort of called recovery, I don't know, academic. I don't know if it's an academic term, but it's sort of something I've heard called snapping. I actually learned that from Kathy Harris, where people will get out of a high control group and then they will snap back to, or not back to the group, but like snap into another close high control group, which is what my
Mm-hmm.
family did. We got out when I was about 13 and then spent the next like I spent the rest of my teenagerhood kind of like going with my family to other like Pentecostal churches and other
Mm-hmm.
evangelical churches because that was,
Mm-hmm.
that was just what they knew and then to me that was normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's very common
Exactly.
that when people get out, they will go to another group that is similar because they're looking to fill that sort of gaping hole that they feel emotionally, like that shame, that
Mm-hmm.
guilt, whatever. So they'll go to a group that's the same, but maybe a little bit less controlling, and then maybe a different one that's a little bit less controlling, and then hopefully work their way out of
Mm-hmm.
that, which is what happened to me, and
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
where are you at with terms of let's call it a higher power? Are you more agnostic or atheist?
So I think when I first left Christianity, I identified as agnostic. I would
Mm-hmm.
say at this point, I'm atheist in terms of a um, individual deity,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm very much now into like metaphysical and paranormal. And so I have a spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't subscribe to any individual deity. And so I would identify as atheist in that regard. But
Mm-hmm.
I I think the technical term of atheist is that you don't believe in any spirituality. I'm not sure what the actual definition is, but yeah, no individual deity.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what it is, sort of like an individual deity or a god or
Hmm. Okay.
that there is some sort of like higher power that's ordering our lives or, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, we're accountable to, which
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, I always like to plug this organization called Recovering from Religion. Um, It's kind of like a really cool little group. They are, maybe not for everybody if you are still, working through where you're at with, terms of your higher power, what you believe in. But it's basically supporting people that it's very non-judgmental. So if you are still, working through it, that's a good place to go and just ask questions and get support. They do peer counseling, so you can go to
Mm,
recoveringfromreligion.org and click on their little banner or whatever, and you can talk with somebody instantly. So it's, people that have joined the organization and
mm,
applied to do this. So you can talk to people all over the world just about getting out of these really controlling situations. And then they also have a resource which is therapists, licensed therapists who are specializing in recovering from
mhm,
close high control groups. And so you can find those resources there. The therapists that they list are, you'd have to pay through your insurance or out of pocket, whatever you do, but the peer-to-peer counseling is completely free. Um, so just throwing that out there for anybody that's listening. But yeah, that's really interesting as far as you being in a closed high control group, going through your awakening or like realization, psychological actualization, whatever you want to call that, just that
mm,
process of growing and becoming yourself more and letting go of all
mhm,
these things that you believed before. It's a really beautiful process, and I understand that too. Like I've considered myself to be spiritual, but not in any particular flavor or whatever. Like I do whatever works for me. Like one thing I like to do that I picked up from sort of new age spirituality is before I go to clean my house, I will take sage or Palo
mhm,
Santo or whatever I have around that I'm using at the
mhm,
time, and I'll just smudge my whole house. And I found that that sort of clears the field, for lack of a better word,
mhm,
to it just makes cleaning, the physical cleaning, somehow
mm,
better, and I don't know how to explain that, but actually when I got out, I sort of went through this whole process and I considered myself to be atheist at one point, and now I would say I'm more agnostic. Like I think there's something, and I don't know if that's me or something else, but it's like something, and the thing that brought me to that was actually studying quantum mechanics and science and learning about sort of like string theory and like the field of like all these
mhm,
particles and how they interact with our consciousness, and realizing like we
mhm.
have so much power in this physical reality. So would you care to talk about any practices that you are interested in as far as metaphysical practices?
Yeah, but just can I just go back for a second
Of course.
about what helped me in my deconstruction?
Yes.
So there are some Facebook groups that are specifically for people who are deconstructing, and they're generally private groups, so you can go and talk in there without worrying about people in your on your friends list seeing what you're posting,
Mm-hmm.
listening to podcasts, um, people who are deconstructing or have deconstructed. And also, for the past like probably 2 years, I've been in an online support group for people who are survivors of high control groups. And all of those things have really helped me um, in my deconstruction process. So I just wanted to say that first. Um, when it comes to smudging, I also do that. I have never thought of doing it when I'm doing physical cleaning, but that is an interesting idea that I think I should try. But I will also do it with sage or Palo Santo or cedar or juniper or a combination thereof. I do it before I start an instrumental transcommunication session, and I do it whenever I feel um, some sort of, it doesn't have to be necessarily like an evil spirit, but just like a negative one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also just, I just do it for cleansing, just like when, whenever too, for spiritual cleansing, just whenever too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's something that I also do. Um, I am into crystals and um, tarot cards and incense. Um, when my wife died, I actually bought certain crystals that are said at least to have certain um, that are used for certain things, like like grieving or just like helping people move on or whatever. So I
Hmm.
bought specific ones for that. That I set up a table in front of the chapel. Like I got obviously permission from the funeral home, and
Hmm.
I had incense on there. I had 5 tarot cards that I had specifically chosen for that, and then I had those crystals, and now I have those crystals in front of her urn.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's something that has given me a lot of um I don't comfort maybe is the word. And I also will use a pendulum
Hmm.
sometimes like before an instrumental transcommunication session to find out where the hot spots are
Hmm.
in a certain place if it's somewhere that I haven't been before. And I the so for people who don't know what an instrumental transcommunication session is, it's basically um so I'm an empath, so there's like like highly sensitive people, and then there are empaths, and then there are mediums. And
Hmm.
so mediums can communicate with the spiritual world without the assistance of tools.
Yeah.
Empaths generally need the assistance of tools. And so I use apps on my phone that I buy because if I could afford like the real name brand ones, I would get, but I can't. So
Like EMF
I
sensor.
just use the EMF sensor. But the one that I like the most is one where um, they use the spirits, entities use the energy from your cell phone battery,
Hmm.
and they can choose words and names and phrases from an extensive dictionary. And
So like a
so
digital
that's
Ouija board.
um I guess sort of, but it's a lot. With the Ouija board, they have to spell out every single word, right? This way they
Right.
can like say in a phrase or names or whatever. And so what I generally do at the beginning of a session, personally, how I do it is first of all, I tell them how to use it because, depending on when they died, they might not have ever seen a cell phone or know what it is. So I tell
Right.
them like what it is, how to use it. I ask them to speak one at a time. I tell them like if they're all speaking at the same time, then I don't know who's saying what.
Hmm.
And so I just say like, can you tell me your name? And then like say what you have to say and then like give somebody else a turn. And they're not always going to do that, but it, it works. And so sometimes it's just like spirits that are passing through or spirits that reside in that place, but sometimes like it's my loved ones who have died, my wife, my dad, my aja, which is like my grandfather on my dad's side. And so yeah, that's how I communicate. That's the way I use the most for communication.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sort of detailing a little bit about that. I don't know. I think on that sort of spectrum of uh, HSP, empath, or medium, I'm probably an
Hmm.
HSP. But I have
Hmm.
a friend that's a medium, and
Hmm.
I did a session with her, and she's like really connected with Freddie Mercury for whatever reason.
Okay,
And so we did sort of
interesting.
like talking with Freddie, and then
Hmm.
my son's father, who passed away about 5 years ago,
Hmm.
came through, and we did a little bit of talking. And then my great grandmother on my mom's side. So that was really special. And it was really interesting. It was the first time I've ever communicated, like that with a medium, and just the way like that her voice, not just like, I mean, not it's her voice, but like the cadence and like the words that were
Hmm.
said,
Hmm.
and just the
Hmm.
tone and even like the
Hmm.
volume. So like when my son's
Hmm.
father was speaking, it was very much stuff he would have said and the way he would have said
Hmm.
it. And then when
Hmm.
it came to my great grandmother, the voice was like very, just like very soft and like feminine and like
Hmm.
that. And I was just blown away by like how that was, because my friend never knew either of these people. And
Hmm.
so that was like, wow, like, because I believe in that kind of thing. But I never really personally experienced it. So that was a really interesting experience that I had earlier this year. Um, So, yeah, I think that's fascinating that I think humanity's sort of evolving to be able to have these kind of experiences again and not have to like sort of hide, because I mean there've always been people like that, but in the not so distant past they've been, burned at the stake, or
Hmm.
had to hide or whatever. And so I think
Hmm.
that that's just really encouraging to know that like we can have this conversation now and I don't feel afraid um in any way
Hmm.
about it. So it's like really cool. Um I also love using crystals. I've been collecting crystals for a long time. Um I don't really like use them for anything in particular. I just kind of like have them, or like sometimes I'll
Hmm.
put certain ones like in a pouch around my neck and just like
Hmm.
feel the frequency of those stones. I generally like to
Hmm.
have like some like darker, more dense stones that I feel like grounding.
Hmm.
And then I'll put some other stones like selenite or like blue or green or pink ones in to sort of like, it just makes me feel like good. I don't know how to explain that.
Hmm. Well, I understand what you mean. Like I have like a necklace pendant that's like a cage that opens up that you can put, and so I'll switch out crystals that I have in that. Um, and I wear it quite regularly. And can I just say a couple things about like when you were saying about connecting with loved ones?
Of course.
Um, so when I do the instrumental transcommunication, like when my wife comes through, like there's a certain like phrase that she always uses so that I know that it's her.
Hmm.
And after she died, I had to sell our house. And and so I asked her to follow me to where I moved. And um so where I moved, she came through like the first time I did a transcommunication session, she came through like four times in that session saying that particular phrase so that I knew that she did come with me.
Hmm.
Um, and something that happened at the house where I lived with her is I had like a thing set up for my dad with crystals and incense and his urns and stuff, photo. And I had like a flat amethyst and then a small tower amethyst, and that was sitting on top of the flat one.
Hmm.
And my dad would knock it off like maybe once a week. And then one of my friends who's a medium, because I have a few friends who are mediums, had come over and she told me that my dad and my wife were actually doing it together. And I was like, but my dad was doing it before Norma died. And then I'm like, hold on a second. Since Norma died, it's being knocked off way more frequently. And so that like is a way that they communicated too. Um, and uh, with my dad, like I actually was never able to connect with him until just in the past year. And I think that part of it is because of putting aside, specifically putting aside my emotions before I start the session to
Mm.
the degree that I can, so that my emotions aren't getting in the way of my loved ones coming through.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because I've been talking with this friend that was a medium about doing this for, I don't know, 6 months to a year before actually happened. And I think a lot of that sort of was like I was interested in it, but I may have had, whatever emotions about it, especially with my son's father, was like the one that was most recent and most sort of like sad for
Hmm.
me. So yeah,
Hmm.
but once I had done sort of, my own internal processing to the point where I was okay, then it happened and it was a really good experience.
Hmm.
So yeah, thanks for sharing all that. That's fascinating. I think that things that are sort of considered to be ma magic or metaphysical, um, they're actually scientific like
Hmm.
reasons for all these things, but we just don't know the
Hmm.
words. We don't have the academic scientific papers to explain all these things yet. And
Hmm.
but for people who might be listening to this that are like, "Oh, that's just woo-woo. I don't understand that." Well, in 50 years, I think we're gonna have a much better understanding of all of these things and better terminology to sort of describe it. And we're just ahead of the curve. So,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, you were talking about the kind of stuff that you've done to deprogram from your experience with the closed high control group that you were in. And would you say that becoming more educated or not educated, but like sort of coming more into your gifts as a empath is part of your deprogramming journey? Or would you say those are not related?
So, the deprogramming or deconstruction from Christianity, I would say, is is a separate thing, but because of being deprogrammed from that mindset, I was able to, without guilt or fear, step into my gifts as an empath.
Beautiful. Beautifully stated. Um, so sort of wrapping up that segment about where you came from with that group and then sort of like where you are now with your spirituality. Is there anything more that you would add to any of that before we move on to sort of looking at the cult criteria?
So I think the only other thing that I wanted to say is like, the in Christianity, especially in evangelical Christianity, like they try and make you scared of what it's going to be like. Your life's going to be horrible if you leave Christianity and God, and you might think that you're having fun, um, but really you're going to be lonely because there'll be a God-shaped hole in your life, and so I think just coming into my own and learning who I am as a person has been really great, and not, being afraid of all of that, and to enjoy my life and have fun. Things that I was told were wrong. But
Mhm.
you know what? Like I don't have a God-shaped hole in my life, and I'm not I'm not lonely for God or anything. And so, yeah, I feel like it's really helped me come into who I am as a person,
Thank
truly.
you. That's really encouraging for other people that are going through the same thing to hear that, it's going to be okay. It
Hmm.
takes time and a lot of time sometimes, but
Hmm.
we'll get there eventually.
Hopefully for
I mean, there's always
people
there's
who
it's not
do.
like there's some place to get, right? That's not what I meant. It's just more like more and more as you go through the process, you find moments in your experience where you feel okay or,
Hmm.
you're not having a really terrible experience anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and everyone's experience is different, but I think a lot of this is really going to be able to help other people who are either in the same thing or thinking about going through the process of coming out of something like that. So, um, yeah, we were going to go over Robert Lifton's criteria as it relates to your experience within the Gateway Christian Community Church.
Hmm.
Um, so let's pull that up. I gotta go to a place on my computer where that lives.